ahead to create my top and side margin line. Now the top margin line is going to be serving as my waistline, and from there I'm going to measure my waist to hip measurement. For this illustration, I'm going to be using 8 inches as my waist to hip measurement, and I'm going to measure it just like that to create a straight line. And with my ruler, I'm going to rule on it to have a straight line. So once I've done that, I'm going to start from my waistline again, that is the top margin line. I'm going to measure my waist to knee measurement. For this design, I'm going to be using 22 inches for my waist to knee measurement, and I'm going to measure it from the top, and I'll rule on it to have a straight line. Once I'm done doing that, I'm going to label it as my knee line. I'll also go ahead to measure my waist to floor measurement starting from the waistline, which is the top margin line. For this illustration, my waist to floor measurement is 34 inches, and I'll measure it from the top down to 34 inches, and I'll do that to have a straight line. And once I'm done with that, I'm going to use my straight ruler to rule on it. I'll make sure that the line is straight, and I'll label it as my waist to floor line. From the top margin line, I'm going to measure my hip divided into 2. For this illustration, my hip measurement is 40 inches. Divided into 2, I have 20 inches. Now from the side margin line, I'm going to start from there and measure 20 inches. I'll measure it down to have a straight line, and I'll proceed to use my straight ruler to connect the measurements together. This is to ensure that I have a straight line. So once I'm through with that, I'll go ahead to divide my hip measurement into 4. That is my quarter hip. The first thing that we do is to divide our hip into 2 and create a straight line with it. Now the next thing that I'm doing now is to divide my hip measurement into 4, and I will measure it from my side margin line straight down to have a straight line, and I'll rule on it. This is because we are drafting both the center front and the center back together. So you need to do this if you want to divide your center front and center back together. Once you are through with that, you're going to label your pattern center front and center back. So now guys, you're going to go to your waistline and you're going to measure your quarter waist measurement. From the center front now, I'm going to be measuring my quarter waist measurement, which is 8 inches. And I'll go to the center back as well, and I'll measure my quarter waist measurement, which is 8 inches. But the next thing I'm going to do now is to add my dart allowance intake. You need to do this because there will be dart allowance at the back. So now for this, I'm going to be using 2 cm as my dart allowance. So then you go back to your center front and you connect your quarter waist measurements to your hip line using the curved part of your ruler, and then you do the same thing on the center back measurement. You're going to connect from this point to your hip line with a curved ruler. Make sure that your lines are not too curvy, just slightly curved. Make sure that you position your ruler very well to achieve that. So now the next thing that I'm going to do now is to go to my knee line. From my knee line, I'm going to be raising my knee. This is to ensure firmness as the thigh area. You need to raise your knee. So now what I'm going to do now is that on my raised knee, I'm going to measure 7 inches. Yes, you can measure as much as 6-7 inches to raise your knee. So I'm going to do that on both center front and center back. Once I'm through with that, I'm going to use my straight ruler to connect these points together, and I'll label this line my raised knee line. Once I'm through with that, I'll go to the middle of my pattern and I'll measure 1 inch towards the center front and 1 inch towards the center back. Now this measurement is constant. It should not be more than 1 inch, because if you use more than 1 inch, you will not be able to walk. So once you've done that, you're going to connect that point to your hip line with a straight line. Please, not curved line. So once you're through with that, you're going to go to your floor measurement, that is your total length. Once you are there, you're going to measure 1.5 inches to pencil your skirt. You can use as much as 2 inches to pencil it, but for this I'm going to be using 1.5 to pencil it, and I'll connect it from my raised knee line to my floor length on both sides. Now we want to work on that positioning. You're going to do this on your center back. So from this point, which is where your line stops at the center back, you're going to measure from your center back to this point. You're going to measure whatever you have and divide this into 2. Once you are done with that, remember that we use 2 cm as our dart intake. So on both sides of the points that I just made there, I'm going to measure 1 cm on both sides. If you use 1 inch as your dart allowance intake, you're going to measure half an inch on both sides. But for this, I use 2 cm. And then for my dart length, I use 4 inches for my dart length. This is dependent on the height of the person that you are working with. You can use 5 inches, you can use 6 inches, but for this one I'm going to use 4 inches, and I'll connect my dart legs to the point. Another thing I'm going to be working on is my butt contouring. On my raised knee line on the center back, I'm going to measure 1 inch inside on my raised knee line, and I'll go to my floor length and measure 1.5 inches on my floor length, and I'll connect both of these dots together with a straight line. I'll connect from here to the floor length, and I'll connect from my raised knee line to my hip line, to nothing on my hip line, just like you see in the video. So now the next thing I'm going to do now is that on my center back, that area which is the zipper side, I'm going to measure 1 inch inside. This is to ensure firmness at the back of your skirts, so that your skirts will not be gapping at the back. So I'll measure 1 inch inside and connect it with a straight line to my hip line. That part is not part of your work. We are going to be cutting it out. So now with this, you're basically done with your long pencil skirt and butt contouring. Now the next thing that you want to do now is to cut it out. Please watch carefully how I am separating my pattern, so you not go and cut where you're not supposed to cut. So please watch carefully. Just follow the same thing that I'm doing in the video. Guys, if you follow exactly what I did in this video, you're going to be having your long pencil skirt with the butt contouring effect. So after separating your pattern, you're going to be using it to cut on your fabric. Don't forget that you cut your center front on fold. Thank you for watching.